So, imagine you are the captain of a massive cargo ship.
Okay, I am picturing it.
You are way out in the middle of the ocean. And suddenly you hit this really violent, terrifying storm.
Like a real life or death situation.
Exactly. The waves are just crashing over the deck. The ship is taking on water fast. And you do the math in your head and you realize the ship is just too heavy.
Right, it's going down.
Yeah, if you do not lighten the load immediately, the ship sinks. Everyone on board will die.
So you have to make a choice.
A split-second decision. You look around and you see millions of dollars worth of expensive cargo. You know, cars, electronics, heavy machinery. And you order your crew to throw all of that incredibly valuable cargo right over the side into the ocean.
You are destroying millions of dollars of stuff.
Millions. It's gone. But the ship stabilizes, you survive the storm, and you make it back to port.
Safe and sound.
But when you get to dry land, the people who own that cargo are waiting for you. They point right at you and say, "You destroyed our property, you committed a crime. So did you."
I mean, technically, yes.
Wait, really?
Yeah, you met every single element of criminal property damage. You intentionally destroyed property that did not belong to you. So in a vacuum, that is absolutely a crime.
But no jury in the world would send that captain to prison. I mean, we all know the captain did the right thing.
Right, and the law knows it too. And that scenario brings us straight into the heart of what we are doing today. The law recognizes that, life is messy.
Very messy.
Sometimes breaking a rule is literally the only way to prevent a massive tragedy. Sometimes pulling the trigger or taking the property is actually the legally correct choice.
Which is wild to think about. Welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. Today we are exploring a really massive legal landscape. It's called the principles of exculpation.
That's a big phrase.
It is. But in simple English, it just means we are looking at the legal reasons why a person who clearly committed a crime might walk away without being punished.
Yeah, we are talking about self-defense. Defending your home, being forced to commit crimes with a gun to your head.
Even getting tricked by the police, right?
Exactly. It's a fascinating area of law because it forces us to look past the action itself. We aren't asking who did it. We already know who did it.
Yeah.
The defendant admits they did it.
Right.
We're asking, why did they do it? And does society accept that reason?
Now, we know you are listening to this deep dive for a very specific reason. You are studying for the multi-state bar examination, the MBE.
And that exam is a monster.
It really is. It is tricky. The examiners just love to hide traps in the questions. So our mission today is very clear. We know you're smart, but we will use simple English. We will use simple grammar.
Short sentences.
Exactly. We are going to break down these dense legal concepts into clear, logical steps. And most importantly, we will point out exactly how the bar examiners are going to try and trick you.
Oh, they will absolutely try to trick you. They love testing those weird exceptions.
Yeah.
They love giving you a scenario where the law feels incredibly unfair just to see if you will follow your emotions or if you will follow the strict rule.
So, we will recap often. We are going to build your mental outline. Let's start with the broad strokes. Before we look at fighting off a mugger or throwing cargo into the ocean, we need to understand how the law categorizes these excuses.
We have two main buckets here: justification and excuse.
Let's start with justification. That's bucket number one.
Right. This goes back to your ship captain's story. Think of a justification as society giving the defendant a nod of approval.
Like a thumbs up.
Yeah, a legal thumbs up. Society looks at the specific facts of the emergency, looks at the action the defendant took, and says, under these exact facts, breaking the law was the right thing to do.
So society's actually happy you did it.
Exactly. You did a good thing.
Yeah.
If you tackle a bank robber as he runs out the door, you're technically committing a battery, right? You're forcefully touching another person without their consent.
Right.
But society says, hey, we want people to stop bank robbers. Your battery is justified.
Okay, that makes total sense. What about the second bucket?
Bucket two is excuse. This one is different. Society does not approve of what you did. Society does not want to encourage it.
So no thumbs up.
No thumbs up.
Mm-hmm.
But society looks at your terrible situation and says, we understand why you broke the rule, and we forgive you.
Give me a quick example of an excuse.
We'll explore this super deeply later, but think about someone holding a gun to your head and forcing you to steal a car.
Okay.
Society does not want people stealing cars. We aren't applauding you for stealing the car, but we understand that you wanted to live, so we excuse the crime.
Okay, I have my two buckets. Justification is approval. Excuse is forgiveness. But if I am in a courtroom, how does this actually play out? Do I just stand up, say I was justified, and walk out the door.
I mean, not quite. And this is a major area for the MBE. We need to talk about the burden of proof.
Right. Who has to prove what?
Exactly. The prosecutor always has the burden of proving every single element of the crime itself. They must prove you were there. They must prove you took the item. They must prove you intended to take it. All of that beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right. Innocent until proven guilty. The state has to do all the heavy lifting.
But these defenses we are talking about today, they are called affirmative defenses. You are introducing a brand new set of facts to the story.
So I'm saying, yes, I did it, but here is this crazy new reason why.
Yes. And because you are bringing up the new reason, the law forces you to start the process.
Wait, if I'm on trial, why do I have to prove anything? I thought I was innocent until proven guilty. That feels like it shifts the burden onto me.
It is a common source of confusion for sure. You are not proving your innocence, you are just raising the issue. The legal text says the defendant must introduce some evidence of the defense.
Like, how much evidence?
Our source uses a great old word. It says you must show more than a scintilla of evidence.
A scintilla? What does a scintilla actually look like in a courtroom?
A scintilla is just a tiny spark, a microscopic amount. So if you are charged with assault, you cannot just sit silently at the defense table and then have your lawyer argue self-defense at the very end. You must provide a spark. You could testify yourself and say, he swung at me first. Or you could show a photo of a bruise on your arm.
Or call a witness.
Yeah, call a witness who says they heard yelling. Just a spark.
Okay, so I provide the spark. I show my tiny bit of evidence that I was acting in self-defense. What happens next? Does the jury decide right then?
No. Once you provide the spark, the rules split. And this depends entirely on what state you are in. The bar examiners will definitely test this.
Okay, MBE tip time. Listen up.
In some states, once you provide the spark, the burden shifts entirely back to the prosecutor. Now, the prosecutor must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you were not acting in self-defense.
Wow, so the prosecutor has to prove a negative? That seems really hard.
It is very hard for a prosecutor to do. But in other states, the rule is different. In those states, the burden stays on you, the defendant. The state will force you to prove your affirmative defense by a preponderance of the evidence.
Preponderance of the evidence. Let's translate that into simple English.
It just means more likely than not. Imagine a scale with two empty plates. You do not have to slam your side of the scale all the way down to the table. You just have to put enough evidence on your plate to make it dip slightly lower than the prosecutor's plate.
So just 51%.
Exactly, just 51%. If the jury thinks it is 51% likely that you acted in self-defense, you win.
So if I am taking this exam tomorrow, my takeaway on the basics is this. Let's recap.
Let's do it.
Justification means society approves. Excuse means society forgives. The prosecutor always has to prove the crime itself. But for these excuses, I, the defendant, have to light the fire. I have to show a tiny spark of evidence.
Perfect.
And after that, the burden shifts based on state rules. The question on the test will tell me the specific rule for that state. I just need to read the prompt carefully.
That is the big MBE tip here. Keep note of who has the burden. Read the statute they give you in the prompt. If they tell you, in this jurisdiction, the defendant bears the burden of proving affirmative defenses, then you apply that 51% rule. Do not assume. Read the prompt.
All right, we have the theory down. Let's get into the real world. Section 2. Let's talk about violence. Protecting human bodies. Self-defense and the defense of others.
We need to divide this by the level of force used. Non-deadly force and deadly force. The rules are very different for each.
Let's start with non-deadly force. We are talking about a shove, a punch, maybe a tackle, something that won't kill anyone.
The rule here is pretty generous. You are allowed to use non-deadly force if you are without fault, and you reasonably believe it is necessary to protect yourself from imminent unlawful force.
I want to pull that apart a bit. First, without fault. I assume that means I didn't start the fight.
Correct. You cannot walk up to a guy in a bar, insult his mother, shove him, and then claim self-defense when he swings back at you. We will talk about the rules for aggressors in a minute, but generally, your hands must be clean.
Okay. Next, the force against me must be unlawful.
Yes. If a police officer is lawfully arresting you, their use of force is lawful. You cannot punch a cop and claim self-defense just because you don't like being handcuffed.
Makes sense. And the threat must be imminent. That means happening right now.
Happening right this very second. Not a threat for tomorrow. Not an hour from now. Imminent.
Now, I see a big caveat in the notes for non-deadly force. It says you never have to retreat before using non-deadly force.
That is true across the board. The law does not force you to run away from a simple punch. If you are standing in a public park and a guy aggressively steps up to you and raises his fist, you can stand your ground and shove him back.
Even if I could easily just turn around and run?
Even then, you do not have to retreat before using non-deadly force.
Simple enough. Now let's raise the stakes. Deadly force. Guns, knives, using a car as a weapon. How do the rules change?
They get much, much stricter. We are talking about ending a human life. The law does not take that lightly at all.
Okay, so what's the rule?
To use deadly force, you still must be without fault. You still must be facing unlawful force. But the magnitude of the threat must be massive. You must reasonably believe that you are facing an imminent threat of death or great bodily harm.
Great bodily harm. So a bruised rib or a bloody nose is not enough to pull a gun.
Absolutely not. You cannot shoot someone to prevent a black eye. Great bodily harm means severe life-altering injuries, broken bones, organ damage, severe trauma.
I want to go back to that word imminent because our sources give a really wild hypothetical to explain this, and I think it shows how strict the law really is. Let's talk about Dave.
Yes, Dave.
Imagine a guy named Dave. Dave hates me. He wants to destroy me. I walk into a room, and Dave is sitting in a chair. Dave's arms and legs are tied completely tightly to the chair with heavy rope. He cannot move an inch.
Okay, he's totally immobilized.
Right. But Dave looks me dead in the eye and says, I have a gun in my pocket. If you come near me, I will blow your head off. He just threatened me with deadly force. Can I pull out my own gun and shoot Dave in self-defense?
No. You would go to prison for murder.
But he just threatened to kill me. He said the words out loud.
Words mean nothing if the ability is not present. The threat must be imminent. The attacker must have the present physical ability to carry out the threat in that exact second.
And since he's tied up.
Exactly. A man tied tightly to a chair cannot shoot you right now. He poses no imminent threat. Therefore, you have absolutely no right to use deadly force.
What if Dave says, I am going to get untied and I'm coming to your house tomorrow night to kill you?
Still no. That is a future threat. You have hours to call the police. You have time to lock your doors. You have time to leave town.
So self-defense is really a last resort.
It's an absolute emergency lever. You are only allowed to pull it when society's normal protections, like the police, cannot reach you in time. If you have time to call for help, the threat is not imminent.
That makes a lot of sense. The law wants to avoid vigilantism. Okay, let's talk about a concept that is universally tested on the bar exam. The duty to retreat.
Yes, this is huge.
Let's say I am walking down the street. Someone pulls a knife on me. They demand my wallet and threaten to stab me. But I have a clear path behind me to run away. I could easily sprint to safety. Do I have to run? Or can I draw my own weapon and fight back?
This is one of the biggest splits in American law. We have a majority rule and we have a minority rule. The bar examiners expect you to know both perfectly.
Okay, let's start with the majority rule. What do most states say?
The majority of jurisdictions say there is no duty to retreat. This is often called the stand your ground principle.
So I don't have to run.
Right. If you are legally allowed to be in that spot, and you are not the aggressor, and you face an imminent threat of death or great bodily harm, you can use deadly force right back, even if you have a completely safe escape route.
That is a very aggressive rule. It basically says my right to be in a public space is more important than the attacker's life.
It is a strong philosophical stance, yes. Society says you should not be forced to flee like a coward when you did nothing wrong.
Okay, so what does the minority rule say?
The minority rule takes the opposite stance. It says that preserving human life, even the life of a criminal attacker, is the highest priority. Under the minority rule, you must retreat before using deadly force.
If I have to run away.
Yes. But there is a massive caveat that students always forget. You only have to retreat if you can do so in complete safety.
Complete safety. What does that mean in real life?
If the attacker has a gun pointed at you, turning your back to run is not safe. You might get shot in the back, so you do not have to retreat.
That makes sense.
Or if the attacker is incredibly fast and close to you with a knife, running might not be safe. You only have to retreat if you know for a fact you can escape without being harmed.
I can totally see how examiners would test that. They will give a scenario in a minority jurisdiction where a guy is trapped in an alley with a knife-wielding attacker blocking the only exit.
Yep, classic question.
The student might think, oh, minority rule, he has to retreat. But he can't retreat safely, so he can fight back.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
You are already thinking like an examiner. But wait, it gets more complicated. Even in a strict minority jurisdiction that forces you to run away, There are three major exceptions, three places where you never have to retreat.
Okay, what are they? Keep note of these, everyone.
First, you never have to retreat in your own home. Your home is your ultimate sanctuary. The law calls this the castle doctrine.
My home is my castle.
Exactly. Even in a minority state, if an armed intruder breaks into your living room, you do not have to run out the back door. You can stand your ground in your castle.
Okay, exception 1 is the home. What is exception 2?
Exception 2 is if you are a police officer making a lawful arrest, or a citizen assisting an officer. The law does not want the police running away from criminals, so they never have to retreat.
Makes total sense. And exception 3?
Exception 3 is if you are in the process of being robbed. If a mugger is actively robbing you, the law does not force you to turn and run.
So from my exam notes, the MBE tip here is clear. Unless the question explicitly says, in a minority jurisdiction, I always apply the majority rule. I assume no duty to retreat.
Yes, assume majority rule.
But if they do mention the minority rule, I look for the complete safety caveat and I look to see if the victim is in their own home.
That is a perfect strategy. Always apply the majority rule unless told otherwise.
Now let's go back to something we mentioned earlier. Being the aggressor, being the person who starts the fight. Let's say I'm having a terrible day. I walk into a bar, I see a guy I really don't like. I walk up and shove him hard into the jukebox.
Okay, you're the aggressor.
Right. And he gets mad, pulls out a knife, and lunges at me. Can I shoot him in self-defense?
As a general rule, no. The aggressor loses their right to self-defense. You started the chain of events. You brought the violence into the room.
But that seems a little rigid, right? What if I just shoved him and he suddenly escalated it to attempted murder? Does the law really say I just have to stand there and let him stab me because I started it?
No, the law is not a suicide pact. There are two very specific ways an aggressor can regain their right to self-defense. The first way is called withdrawal.
How do I withdraw legally? Do I just start walking backward?
You have to make it incredibly clear. The law requires you to attempt to remove yourself from the fight in good faith, and you must communicate that desire to the other person.
So I have to actually say, I'm done.
You have to say it, or your actions have to be universally understood. You put your hands up, open-palmed, you back toward the door. You say, my fault, man. I'm sorry. The fight is over.
Okay, so a clear signal.
Right. You have to clearly signal that you are ending the violence. If you do that, and the guy with the knife keeps coming after you, he's now the aggressor. You have regained your right to self-defense.
Okay, that makes sense. I reset the dynamic. What is the second way to regain my right?
The second way is exactly the scenario you just described. A sudden, massive escalation.
So my minor shove into the jukebox.
Right. You use non-deadly force, a simple battery. But the victim of your shove instantly bypassed a normal reaction and escalated straight to deadly force. He pulled a knife and lunged.
Wow.
He escalated the fight so rapidly that you did not even have a fraction of a second to put your hands up and withdraw.
I had no chance to apologize or leave.
Exactly. Because his escalation was so sudden and so extreme, the law recognizes that he completely changed the nature of the encounter. In that very specific scenario, the original aggressor can use deadly force to save their own life.
Because the punishment for being a jerk in a bar should not be getting stabbed to death without a chance to defend yourself. All right, let's do a quick recap note. We've covered a lot. Deadly force requires an imminent threat of death or great harm. Majority rule says no retreat needed. Aggressors lose their rights unless they back off or the other person escalates to deadly force.
Perfect summary.
Now, we have spent a lot of time on defending ourselves, but what about defending other people? Let's say I am walking down the street. I look into an alley and I see a massive guy brutally beating a smaller guy.
Okay.
The smaller guy is screaming for help. Can I run into the alley and fight off the massive guy?
This is the defense of others. And it is a wonderful concept, but legally, it is a minefield. First, let's address who you can defend. Does it have to be your wife or your child?
I would assume the law requires you to have some relationship to the person. Otherwise, you'd just have random citizens jumping into every street brawl they see.
That is a logical assumption, but the majority rule actually does the opposite. The majority rule says you can defend anyone, a family member, a friend, or a total stranger.
Wow, really?
Yes. The law wants to encourage people to protect the innocent.
But what if I get it wrong? Let's go back to that alley. I see the massive guy pinning the smaller guy against the brick wall. I assume the massive guy is a mugger.
Naturally.
So I pick up a heavy trash can and smash it over the massive guy's head. I knock him out. But then the smaller guy jumps up and runs away, and the massive guy wakes up, pulls out a badge, and says, I am an undercover police officer, and I was arresting that drug dealer.
Ah, this is the classic mistake scenario.
Yeah.
You used force to protect someone who was actually resisting a lawful arrest.
Oops.
Yeah, big oops. The legal term here is the status of the aided person. Did you have the legal right to hit that cop? Again, we have a brutal split between majority and minority rules.
Tell me the bad news first. What is the minority rule?
The minority rule is incredibly harsh. It says that you step into the shoes of the person you are defending.
Let me use an analogy here. The minority rule sounds like a terrible relay race. Imagine you are running the anchor leg of a relay race. You run the fastest lap of your life, a perfect run. But when you cross the finish line, the judge tells you that the very first runner on your team stepped out of bounds.
Well, that's good.
The whole team is disqualified. It doesn't matter how perfect your run was, you inherit the mistake of the person before you.
That's a brilliant analogy. Under the minority rule, if the person you are helping did not have the legal right to fight back, you do not have the right to fight back.
Right.
In your alley scenario, the drug dealer being arrested had absolutely no legal right to fight the undercover cop. So when you step into the drug dealer's shoes, you have no right either. You are guilty of assaulting a police officer.
That is terrifying. If I lived in a minority jurisdiction, I would never help anyone. I would just pull out my phone and call 911. The risk of guessing wrong is just way too high.
And that is exactly why it is the minority rule. Legal scholars realize that this rule created a chilling effect. It made people terrified to be good Samaritans. Society wants people to intervene when they see someone being beaten.
So what does the majority rule say? How do they fix it?
The majority rule, which the legal text calls the better view, focuses on your mind, not the objective reality. The majority rule says that as long as it reasonably appeared that the person needed help, you have a valid defense.
So I don't step into their shoes.
No. You stand in your own shoes. The jury will ask, would a reasonable person walking past that alley look at that scene and conclude that an innocent person was being violently attacked?
And if the answer is yes?
If the answer is yes, you are protected, even if you were completely wrong about the reality of the situation.
So for my MBE notes, another MBE tip, I need to assume the majority rule applies unless told otherwise. That means I can defend a total stranger, and if I make a reasonable mistake about who the bad guy is, I am legally safe.
Yes. Stress the difference between majority and minority rules here. Always apply the majority rule based on reasonable appearances.
Awesome. We have covered a massive amount of ground on protecting human bodies. Let's transition to Section 3. How does the law feel about protecting things? Places, property, objects?
The rules change dramatically here, and if you don't pay attention, this is where you will lose points on the exam. Let's start with your home, the defense of a dwelling.
We talked about the castle doctrine earlier regarding retreating, but what force can I actually use to keep someone out of my house?
For non-deadly force, you have wide latitude. You are justified in using non-deadly force to prevent or stop an unlawful entry into your home.
Like pushing someone away.
Right. If a drunk person is confused and trying to push their way through your front door, you can put your hands on their chest and shove them backward onto the porch.
Simple, but let's escalate. Can I use deadly force to protect my house? If someone breaks my window and climbs in, can I just start shooting?
Not automatically. The law is very specific about when deadly force is allowed in the home. You can only use it in two specific situations. Situation number 1, tumultuous entry plus personal danger.
Tumultuous, meaning violent, riotous, aggressive.
Yes, someone kicking the door off its hinges, someone smashing a sliding glass door with a crowbar. The entry itself must be violent, but that is only half the requirement.
What's the other half?
You must also reasonably believe that the use of deadly force is necessary to prevent a personal attack on you or someone else inside.
Wait, let me test that. Let's say a guy kicks my door off its hinges. Total tumultuous entry. But as he steps inside, I clearly see he is unarmed, and he immediately runs past me, grabs my television, and turns around to run back out. Can I shoot him in the back?
Based solely on the tumultuous entry rule? No, because once you see he just wants the TV and is running away, you no longer have a reasonable belief that you are in personal danger.
But he is in my house.
Which brings us to situation number 2. You can use deadly force to prevent a person from entering your home if you reasonably believe they intend to commit a felony inside.
Ah. And stealing a television after breaking in is burglary. Burglary is a felony.
Exactly. So, in many jurisdictions, preventing that felony would justify the deadly force. But you have to be careful. The felony rule is broad, but it is meant to stop serious crimes.
Okay, so the home has some strong protections, but what about my personal property outside the home? My car,
Hmm.
my expensive tools, my laptop?
The rules shrink drastically here.
Oh,
For non-deadly force, you can use it to stop someone from trespassing on your land or taking your stuff. If someone tries to grab your purse, you can slap their hand away.
okay.
But the law requires a procedural step. You generally must ask them to stop first.
I have to politely request that the thief stop stealing.
You must use your words first, yes. Unless asking them would clearly be futile or put you in physical danger. Also, you can only use force to protect property you actually possess right now.
Meaning I can't be a vigilante days later.
Exactly. If someone steals your lawnmower on Monday and you see it sitting in their driveway on Thursday, you cannot walk over and tackle them to get it back. You must be in immediate pursuit of the thief right as the crime is happening.
Or I just have to call the cops.
Once they get away, your right to use force ends.
Hmm.
You have to call police.
Now for the most important question. Deadly force for property.
Hmm.
Let me give you a scenario that feels very real to a lot of people. I am sitting at a coffee shop. I have my incredibly expensive laptop on the table. It has my entire life's work on it.
Okay.
The code for my startup, the manuscript for my novel, my financial records. A man sprints by, grabs my laptop, and keeps running. I happen to be a lawful concealed carry permit holder. I draw my weapon. I have a perfectly clear shot at his legs. Can I shoot him to stop him from taking my entire livelihood?
No, absolutely, unequivocally never.
Wait, so if someone is walking away with my incredibly expensive laptop and I have a clear shot, I can't take it? What if that laptop is my whole livelihood?
The law does not care. You need to burn this rule into your memory for the exam. Defense of property alone can never justify the use of deadly force.
There are no exceptions.
None. Deadly force for property, period, is a no. The law has made a fundamental philosophical calculation. Human life, no matter whose life it is, always legally outweighs property.
So the thief's life is worth more than my stuff.
The life of a fleeing thief is legally worth more than your laptop, your car, or your life savings in a briefcase. You cannot kill to protect an object.
But what if I am chasing him to get the laptop back and he suddenly pulls out a knife?
Well, that changes the entire legal landscape. Because now you are no longer defending property. The moment he pulls a knife, he introduces the threat of imminent death or great bodily harm.
Oh, I see.
The situation is instantly transformed from defense of property into the self-defense. Now, you can use deadly force, but legally you are shooting him to stop the knife, not to save the laptop.
Okay, so for the MBE, what is the classic trick question they use for this rule?
Oh, make a huge note in your study guide for this one. The examiners love to use mechanical devices. They will give you a scenario where a farmer is tired of people stealing tools from his empty barn. So he rigs a shotgun to the door on a tripwire.
A spring gun.
Right, a spring gun. A thief opens the door, and the gun shoots him in the legs. The examiners will ask if the farmer has a valid defense.
And the student might think, well, the thief was committing a felony burglary, and we said you can use deadly force to stop a felony in a dwelling.
Right, but a barn is not a dwelling where people sleep. And more importantly, a spring gun cannot evaluate if a human life is in danger. A spring gun just protects property.
And you can never use deadly force just for property.
Exactly. Because a spring gun only protects property, the farmer is guilty of battery or murder. Remember, deadly force for an empty building or an object is always the wrong answer.
Let's do a quick recap note. You can use non-deadly force for your home and your stuff. You can only use deadly force in your home if there's a violent entry posing personal danger or to stop a felony. And never use deadly force just for property.
That's the golden rule.
Let's move into our next major theme, law and order. Section 4. Up until now, we have talked about personal defense, defending my body, my family, my house. Now we are looking outward. What are the rules for enforcing the law generally in society?
We are talking about crime prevention and making arrests. Let's look at the police officers first. What force can a police officer use to stop a fleeing criminal?
I feel like I've seen movies where a cop yells halt and then just shoots the guy running away.
Hollywood gets this wrong constantly. The Supreme Court established the modern rule in a very famous case called Tennessee v. Garner. The rule is strict. A police officer cannot use deadly force to catch an unarmed, non-dangerous fleeing suspect.
So if a teenager shoplifts a candy bar from a convenience store and runs away across a parking lot, the police officer absolutely cannot draw a weapon and shoot him in the back.
Correct. Shooting an unarmed fleeing shoplifter is an unconstitutional seizure. The officer can only use deadly force to stop a fleeing felon if the felon threatens death or serious bodily harm, and the force is necessary to prevent escape.
Give me a scenario where the officer can shoot.
An armed bank robber. The robber just shot a security guard inside the bank. He runs out the door, holding the gun, and sprints toward a crowded subway station.
That sounds dangerous.
Extremely. In that specific scenario, the officer has probable cause to believe the fleeing felon poses a massive deadly threat to the public. The officer is justified in using deadly force to stop the escape.
Now, our notes have a really interesting detail here about bystanders. Let's say I am just walking down the street eating an ice cream cone. A police officer is chasing a suspect. The officer points at me and yells, "Hey, tackle that guy. Do I have any legal authority to do?"
Yes, you do. A police officer has the legal right to summon a bystander to assist in making a lawful arrest.
Yeah.
And here's the brilliant part. The moment the officer enlists your help, you, the bystander, get the exact same legal authority as the officer to use force.
But what if, I don't know the whole story, what if the officer is actually out of control and making a completely illegal, unconstitutional arrest of an innocent person? If I tackle the innocent person, am I guilty of assault?
No. As long as you, the bystander, are acting in good faith to assist a uniformed officer, your assistance is justified. You are protected.
Even if the cop is breaking the rules.
Even if it later turns out the officer was wildly exceeding his authority. The public policy here is clear. The law wants citizens to feel safe helping the police without constantly worrying about being sued or arrested themselves.
Okay, helping a cop is safe. But what if there is no cop around? What if I, a regular private citizen, decide to play Batman and make a citizen's arrest on my own?
This is where you step onto incredibly thin ice. The law strongly discourages citizens' arrests. A private citizen can use non-deadly force to make an arrest only if two things are true. First, a crime must have actually happened in reality. Second, the citizen must reasonably suspect the specific person they are arresting.
Okay, non-deadly force is fine if I am reasonable. But what if I try to make a citizen's arrest using a gun? What if I use deadly force?
Here is where the trap closes, and this is highly tested. A private person only has a defense to the use of deadly force if the person they shoot was actually guilty of the dangerous felony.
Actually guilty.
Yes, actually factually guilty. It is not enough that it reasonably appeared they were guilty.
I have an analogy for this. Making a citizen's arrest with a firearm is like going to a casino and betting your entire life on a single hand of blackjack. If you are a regular person and you see a guy running out of a bank and you shoot him to stop him, you are betting your entire freedom that you are 100% correct.
Yep.
If it turns out you made a reasonable mistake, maybe it was just a guy late for a bus who happened to be running near a bank, you still lose the bet. You go to prison for murder. Your reasonable belief means absolutely nothing.
It is a perfect analogy. Stress the difference here for the MBE. The police get leeway for making reasonable mistakes in the heat of the moment. Private citizens get zero leeway when they use deadly force. If you are going to play hero with a gun, you must be absolutely right.
For the MBE, I need to look closely at the identity of the person using force. Cop means reasonable mistake is okay. Private citizen means actual guilt is required.
Spot on.
Yeah.
Now, let's flip the perspective. What if you are the one being arrested? What are the rules for resisting arrest?
Okay, what if I am walking down the street and a man in plain clothes jumps out of an unmarked sedan and violently tackles me to the concrete?
What do you assume is happening?
I assume I am being mugged or kidnapped. I am going to fight for my life.
And you are legally allowed to. If you do not know the person is a police officer, you can lawfully repel the attack with whatever force is necessary, including deadly force, because you are acting in valid self-defense against what appears to be a violent crime.
But what if I do know? What if the officer is wearing a bright blue uniform with a badge, but I know for a fact the arrest warrant is fake and the arrest is illegal? Can I shove the officer away?
This is another major split in the law. Under the traditional majority rule, you can use non-deadly force to resist a bad, unlawful arrest by a known officer.
Only non-deadly. I can't shoot him.
Right. But be very careful, because the modern trend and the minority rule have completely changed this. The minority rule says you cannot use any force to resist a known police officer, even if the arrest is completely, totally, 100% illegal.
Wait, so I just have to let myself be unlawfully kidnapped by the state?
Yes. The philosophy behind the minority rule is that a chaotic street corner is not the proper venue to argue constitutional law. When citizens fight armed police officers on the street, people die.
That's true.
The law prefers that you submit to the illegal arrest peacefully, go to the police station, and then sue the city for millions of dollars in a calm courtroom later. Keep the violence off the streets.
That is a tough pill to swallow, but I understand the logic. Let's do a quick recap. Deadly force for arrests is strictly limited to dangerous situations. Cops get more leeway for mistakes than private citizens. And resisting a known cop is tricky and split by state.
Nicely summarized.
Let's move into one of the most intellectually fascinating areas of the law. Section 5. Choosing the lesser evil. We are looking at necessity versus duress.
Up until now, we have mostly talked about fighting off bad guys. But sometimes there is no bad guy attacking you. Sometimes you are just trapped in a terrible situation and you are forced to choose between breaking the law or suffering a catastrophic outcome.
Let's look at necessity first.
Right. Necessity is the choice of evils.
Our source text calls it exactly that. You intentionally break the criminal law because following the law would cause a much worse harm to society.
This brings us all the way back to the start of our deep dive. Your cargo ship captain. The captain committed criminal property damage by throwing the cargo into the ocean. But he did it to save the lives of his crew. He chose the lesser evil.
Losing property is a lesser evil than losing human lives.
Exactly. Therefore, his crime is justified by necessity.
Let me push the boundary of this. What if the captain realizes that throwing the cargo overboard isn't enough? What if the ship is still sinking? So the captain looks at 5 passengers, pulls out a gun, and forces them to jump overboard to their deaths to lighten the ship and save the other 50 passengers. He chose the lesser evil, right? 5 deaths is better than 50 deaths.
The math might say yes, but the law screams no. That is murder. The text is absolute on this strict rule. Causing the death of an innocent person to protect property or even to save other lives is incredibly difficult to justify under strict common law necessity. You cannot play God and choose which innocent people die to save others.
Throwing cargo off to save passengers is justified. Throwing passengers off to save cargo is murder.
Exactly.
Are there any other limits on the necessity defense?
Yes. The test must be objective. A good faith but crazy belief doesn't count. A jury has to agree that a reasonable person would view the harm you prevented as greater than the harm you caused. Also, you cannot use the necessity defense if you created the emergency in the first place.
So if I intentionally set my own house on fire for insurance money, and then I have to steal my neighbor's car to escape the flames, I can't claim necessity for stealing the car.
Exactly. You authored your own disaster. You don't get the defense. Now, let's contrast necessity with duress. The text also calls this compulsion or coercion.
Let's remind our listeners of the big buckets from the beginning. Necessity is a justification. Society approves of throwing the cargo away. But duress is an excuse. Society doesn't approve, but they forgive.
What is duress? Duress is when you commit a crime because of a threat of imminent death or great bodily harm to yourself or your family, or sometimes third parties.
A human threat.
Yes. Someone puts a loaded gun to your head and says, walk into that bank and steal the money, or I will pull this trigger.
So I steal the money.
And you will likely have a successful defense of duress. You were forced to commit larceny.
But let me give you the hardest hypothetical. The bad guy puts the gun to my head. But he doesn't say steal the money. He points at an innocent bank teller and says, shoot that innocent teller or I will shoot you. If I don't shoot, I die. If I do shoot, the teller dies. I pull the trigger and kill the teller. Do I have the defense of duress?
No. You are guilty of murder.
But I had a gun to my head. I was terrified.
It is the most brutal rule in criminal law. Duress is never a defense to intentional criminal homicide. Never. Circle this in red for the MBE. If someone puts a gun to your head and says, kill that innocent person or I kill you, and you do it, you are guilty of murder.
The law really demands that I sacrifice my own life. It demands that I be a martyr.
Yes. The common law expects you to be a hero. You cannot trade an innocent life for your own life. The law views all innocent lives as legally equal. You do not have the right to prioritize your survival over the teller's survival.
Wow.
Now, realistically, a prosecutor might reduce the charges, or a judge might be lenient at sentencing. But strictly legally, as a complete affirmative defense, duress fails for murder.
What about threats to property? What if the bad guy says, help me steal this car or I will burn down your $1 million mansion?
Traditionally, at common law, threats to property do not count for duress. It had to be a threat of physical violence to a human body. But some modern states will allow a duress defense for property threats, but only if they do the math and find that the value of the property being threatened vastly outweighs the harm of the minor crime you were forced to commit.
Let me ask a question that every student studying for the MBE is screaming right now. How do I tell the difference between necessity and duress on a multiple choice test, they sound functionally identical.
It is the most common point of confusion. Here is the magic key. Look at the source of the threat. Duress always involves a human threat. A human being with a mind and a weapon is forcing you to do something. Necessity usually involves circumstances, natural forces, or acts of God. The weather, a fire, a plane crash.
Let's use two clear examples to lock this in.
Scenario A. A human with a gun points it at you and commands you to break into a locked cabin to steal food for him. That is a human threat. That is duress.
Scenario B. You are the sole survivor of a plane crash in the frozen wilderness. You are starving and freezing. You find a locked cabin, and you break into it to steal food so you don't die of exposure. That is a threat from natural circumstances. That is necessity.
That is perfectly clear. Human equals duress. Nature equals necessity. Time for a recap note. Necessity is breaking the law to prevent a bigger disaster, often caused by nature. Duress is breaking a law because a human threatened your life. Neither defense allows you to murder an innocent person to save yourself or your stuff.
Very well said.
Let's keep moving. We are entering Section 6. I didn't know. Up until now, the defendant knew exactly what they were doing, but they claimed they were forced to do it. Now we are transitioning to defendants who say, I didn't realize what I was doing was wrong.
We are looking at mistake of fact and mistake of law. This section is crucial for understanding a defendant's mental state.
Let's start with mistake of fact, getting the physical reality wrong. The mistake of fact only helps you if it proves that you did not have the specific mental state required for the crime. Remember, most crimes require two things: a guilty act and a guilty mind. If your mistake erases the guilty mind, you are not guilty of the crime.
The rules for this depend heavily on what kind of crime is charged. Our notes divide this into general intent crimes and specific intent crimes. Let's tackle general intent first.
General intent crimes, or malice crimes, require you to be generally aware of your actions. For these crimes, your mistake must be reasonable. An objectively reasonable person would have made the same mistake.
Let's use the classic law school hypothetical, the hunter.
Ah, yes. You are hunting legally in a dense forest. You see movement behind a thick bush. You hear rustling. You hear what sounds exactly like a deer call.
Okay.
You look through your scope, and the shape and color look exactly like a deer. You reasonably believe it is a deer. You fire your rifle. You walk over, and to your absolute horror, it is a human being wearing a brown coat. They are dead.
That is an unimaginable tragedy. But legally, am I guilty of murder?
No. Your mistake of fact believing the person was a deer was objectively reasonable under the circumstances because you reasonably thought you were shooting an animal. You did not have the required mental intent to kill a human being. The mistake erases the malice.
But let me change the facts. What if I am in the woods, I don't see anything, I just close my eyes, spin around, and fire my rifle into the trees, hoping to hit a deer by pure luck, and I kill a camper?
That is not a reasonable mistake. That is extreme recklessness. A reasonable mistake requires actual observation and logic. Closing your eyes and shooting is reckless disregard for human life. You would likely be guilty of a homicide crime.
Let me try one more variation. I am in the woods. I see a figure walking. I look through my scope, and I am absolutely convinced it is my mortal enemy, Bob. I hate Bob. I intend to kill Bob. I pull the trigger. The person dies. I walk up, and it's not Bob. It's a complete stranger named Charlie. Can I claim mistake of fact? Oops, I didn't mean to kill Charlie.
No. This is called transferred intent. Your mistake does not change the core reality. You intended to kill a human being. You had the mental state for murder. The fact that you are mistaken about the specific identity of the human does not excuse the intent to kill. You are guilty.
Okay, so for general intent, the mistake must be reasonable. Now let's pivot to specific intent crimes. Things like larceny, robbery, burglary, crimes where you must have a very specific goal in mind.
This is where the law becomes much friendlier to the defendant. For specific intent crimes, any mistake of fact, even a totally unreasonable, foolish, absurd mistake, is a valid defense.
Wait, any mistake, even if I am being an idiot?
Yes, because specific intent crimes require you to actively desire a specific outcome. If you make a mistake, even a dumb one, it proves you didn't desire that criminal outcome.
Give me an example.
The classic example from our sources is the umbrella at the restaurant. You are leaving a busy restaurant. It is pouring rain outside. There is a bucket of umbrellas by the door. You reach in and grab a black umbrella. You honestly, genuinely believe it is the exact umbrella you left there a week ago. In reality, it belongs to the person standing next to you.
And larceny requires the specific intent to steal.
Exactly. Since you honestly believe the umbrella was your own property, it is logically impossible for you to have the intent to steal someone else's property.
Hmm.
You lack the specific state of mind, and here's the key. It does not matter if your mistake was stupid.
Really?
It doesn't matter if your umbrella was actually green and you grabbed a black one because you weren't paying attention. As long as your belief was honest, you are not guilty of larceny.
What about strict liability crimes? Things like speeding or selling alcohol to a minor?
Strict liability is the exception to everything we just talked about. Strict liability crimes require zero state of mind. The prosecutor does not care what you intended or what you thought. They only have to prove you did the physical act. Therefore, mistake of fact is never a defense to strict liability.
So if I'm a bartender, a kid walks in. He looks 30 years old. He hands me an incredibly realistic fake ID. I inspect it. It stands perfectly. I reasonably believe he is of legal age. I sell him a beer. Turns out he's 19.
You are guilty. Your mistake was completely reasonable, but it does not matter. Selling alcohol to a minor is strict liability. You did the act, you face the penalty.
Mistake of fact is like picking up the wrong suitcase at the airport. You honestly thought it was yours. Now, what about mistake of law? Getting the rule book wrong. That's like knowing exactly which suitcase you picked up, but not knowing it's illegal to carry the cheese inside it.
Great analogy. The general rule here is one of the most famous maxims in all of law. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. It is almost never a defense to say, I didn't know that conduct was illegal, even if your ignorance is reasonable.
But the law loves exceptions. When does ignorance of the law actually work?
There are a few narrow exceptions. The first one is complex but highly testable. Ignorance works if the mistake of law actually negates the intent required for the crime. This usually happens when a statute requires you to know a collateral legal status.
Let's break that down with an example.
Okay. Imagine a state statute that says, it is a felony to sell a firearm to anyone you know is a convicted felon. You decide to sell a hunting rifle to your neighbor. You know your neighbor was convicted of simple assault 5 years ago.
Right.
But you genuinely mistakenly believe that simple assault is only a misdemeanor. You do not realize that in your state, assault is classified as a felony.
So I know the factual history. He committed an assault, but I am mistaken about the legal classification of that history.
Exactly. Are you guilty of selling a gun to a known felon?
Sure.
No, because the statute explicitly requires you to know he is a felon. Your mistake about the law means you lack that specific required knowledge.
That is a brilliant distinction. What is another exception?
Exception 2. The statute was simply not published or made reasonably available before you acted.
That feels like basic due process.
It is. Exception 3. You reasonably relied on an official interpretation, like from an attorney general. If the head of the state tax department issues you an official letter saying your business does not owe a specific tax, you are protected.
I see where this is going. What if I don't call the government? What if I just call my own private lawyer? I pay him $1,000 an hour. He investigates, and he tells me my new business model is completely 100% legal. I launch the business. Turns out it's massive wire fraud. Can I use his expensive advice as a shield?
Generally, no. Relying on your own private lawyer's advice is not an affirmative defense to a crime. You take the risk of your lawyer being wrong.
That feels harsh. I tried to do the right thing by hiring an expert.
It is harsh, but the law doesn't want citizens buying get-out-of-jail-free cards by shopping around for a lawyer willing to sign off on shady behavior.
So for my MBE prep, pay close attention to the crime charged. If it's a specific intent crime like larceny, look for any honest mistake of fact. And if a question shows someone relying on their private lawyer, do not let them off the hook easily. That is almost always a distractor answer.
Excellent tip.
Quick recap note. For specific intent crimes, any honest mistake of fact works. For general intent, the mistake must be reasonable. Not knowing the law is rarely an excuse, unless it proves you lacked a specific mental element or you got bad advice from a top government official.
Spot on.
Let's move into our final section, Section 7, the victim and the police. We're looking at external factors. What if the victim is totally cool with the crime, or what if the police are the ones who made it happen?
Let's look at the victim first. Consent, condonation, and victim criminality. Start with consent. If I ask my friend to punch me in the face and he does, is it a crime?
I mean, it's still battery, right?
Yes. Generally, no defense. You cannot consent to a breach of the peace. You certainly cannot consent to be murdered. However, consent becomes a complete defense if it removes a required element of the crime.
How does consent remove an element?
Look at kidnapping. Kidnapping requires moving someone against their will. If a fully capable adult freely consents to getting in your car and driving across the country with you, it is legally impossible to kidnap them. The consent destroys the against their will element. The crime simply ceases to exist.
But the consent has to be real, voluntary, legally capable, and without fraud.
Very real, yes.
Well,
What about condonation? This means forgiveness after the fact. Let's say I steal my neighbor's lawnmower. The police arrest me. The next day, my neighbor feels bad, comes to the station, and says, "Hey, I forgive him. Let him go." Do I get to go home?
I'm guessing no.
No. Forgiving the criminal after the crime is no defense. In criminal law, the victim does not press charges. The state presses charges. The neighbor's forgiveness might convince the prosecutor to drop the case, but legally, it does not erase the crime.
What if the victim is a terrible person? Does victim criminality give me a free pass? If I defraud a guy who made his money through illegal gambling, am I safe?
No. The fact that his money was dirty, or that he's a criminal himself, is no defense for your independent crime. Still fraud.
Okay, now for the grand finale. One of the most famous and most misunderstood concepts in all of criminal law: entrapment.
If you ask the average person on the street, they think everything the police do is entrapment.
Right, like the cop hid his cruiser behind a billboard and caught me speeding. That's entrapment.
Exactly. But true legal entrapment is incredibly narrow. Entrapment occurs only when the intent to commit the crime originated not with the defendant, but with the creative activities of law enforcement officers.
Our notes say it has two mandatory elements. Element 1, the criminal design originated with law enforcement. Element 2, the defendant must not have been predisposed to commit the crime.
That second element is the killer. Predisposition. That word is everything. Predisposed means you are already willing, ready, and able to commit the crime before the police ever even approached you. If you are predisposed, you absolutely cannot be entrapped.
Let's use the source example to clear this up. Imagine an undercover police officer posing as a desperate drug addict. He walks up to a guy standing on a known drug corner. The officer begs the guy, "Please, man, I need a fix." The guy says, "Sure, $20," and hands over the narcotics. The officer arrests him. Is that entrapment?
No, it is absolutely not entrapment.
But the cop begged him. The cop initiated the conversation.
It doesn't matter. The courts have ruled that the undercover officer merely provided an opportunity for the commission of a crime by someone who was otherwise ready and willing to commit it. The guy was a drug dealer. He was predisposed to sell drugs. The police did not plant the idea of selling drugs into the mind of an innocent person.
So real entrapment is when the police take a totally innocent person and badger or harass them until they finally break down and commit a crime.
Right. It requires planting the seed of crime in an innocent mind.
Can I be entrapped by my neighbor?
No. Entrapment is exclusively against government action. You cannot be entrapped by a private citizen.
Now, what if I supply material? Wait. What if the government supplies materials? What if an undercover agent infiltrates a drug ring and actually provides the illegal chemicals needed to cook the drugs?
Under federal law, the government providing the materials for the crime, even illegal drugs, is not automatically entrapment. As long as the defendants were predisposed to run the lab, the government can supply ingredients and still arrest them.
Is there a minority rule for entrapment?
Yes. The minority rule uses the objective test. This focuses only on police behavior. Would the police tactics make a totally innocent person commit the crime? If yes, it's entrapment, regardless of the defendant's background.
If I am on trial, can I say, "I didn't do it, but even if I did, the cops entrapped me"?
The modern trend and Supreme Court rules say yes. You can argue alternative defenses.
Yeah.
You can raise entrapment even while completely denying the crime.
My MBE tip for entrapment: the most tested concept is predisposition. If the facts show the defendant was already engaged in the criminal activity before the police showed up, the entrapment defense will fail. Do not get distracted by the undercover cop's actions.
Exactly how to beat those questions.
Time for a final recap node. A victim forgiving you doesn't stop a trial. You can't claim entrapment just because an undercover cop bought drugs from you. The cop has to plant the idea in the mind of an innocent person.
Beautifully done.
We have made it through the entire landscape. That was a massive exploration of exculpation. Let's do a final wrap-up.
We covered justifications, doing the right thing, excuses like duress where a human threatens you.
We looked at self-defense, defending property where deadly force is never allowed.
We went through mistakes, specific versus general intent, and entrapment, police creating criminals.
Before we sign off, we want to leave you with a provocative thought.
We learned today that you can use deadly force to protect your life, but never just to protect your property. And yet, you can use deadly force to prevent a burglary in your home. Think about the tension there. Where exactly is the line between protecting the bricks of your house and protecting the safety of the people inside it? As you review your notes, ask yourself how you would argue that line in a courtroom.
That is a phenomenal question. It shows the law is a living debate. Good luck to you on the MBE. You are going to crush it. Thanks for joining this deep dive.